Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butts-Tester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about having a renewed spirit, about love, about purpose, how pain sometimes can turn into promise, and of course, about the beauty of our future. My guest today is Ina Goldberg, and we're going to talk about her book, Each Trickle After the Other. Now, you know, say it with me, go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Ina. Thank you so much for joining me on Daily Spark today.
Hi, Dr. Angela. Good to talk to you as well.
Thank you. Please excuse the raspy voice here. My allergies are acting up, but I am so excited to be speaking with you today about your book. I love the title. Now, before we do that, I love titles that, you know, kind of intrigue you. They make you think and go, I wonder what she's talking about there. Now, before we talk about your book, though, I want to ask you, and this is a question that I ask many of my authors, and that is, what makes you you? What makes Ina the person that she is today?
You know, the best thing I can tell you is that I've lived a life where I was always in control of it. Everything I did, I had schedules, and suddenly 7 years ago, there was a watershed moment, and it was an illness. And what happened was that it opened a whole new world for me. It was a second chance, a second life. And since then, things are much better than they were before, though I wouldn't have realized that if it hadn't been for that moment.
You know, I love those defining moments in our world where, you know, everything kind of shifts, and it shifts toward the good, and we're able to follow along on that path and just blossom into who God really has, who we are supposed to be, and the call that is on our life. I love that. I love that. Now, when you were a young woman, and I'm talking like high school, even maybe, you know, early college, in your 20s, did you think that you were going to be an author? Is that something that was on your to-do list?
I'm not sure it was. I did like writing. It helped me to write things, and I did a lot of that in my teens, my 20s. Of course, then came the thing where I had to make a living, you see. And writing,
right? That's a little important, right?
And writing poetry or writing was not going to do that for me. I did learn the insurance business, and in doing that, I made it a part of who I was. I love to help people to get things done for them. See, because money, what I learned in life is that money, it's the outcome of a well-lived life. It's not its purpose.
Yeah.
You do a good job, you make the money, then things are wonderful, because I have known people in my life who money was the only thing, and they were not very happy. So money's the outcome. It's not the purpose. And I've learned that so much in my life, and I think it's important to learn.
That is, I love the way that you phrase that, because I think so many people, especially in today's time, they have it the other way around. They have the money as the driving force, the thing that they're kind of on that rat wheel for, and they're just chasing it, and they're caring less about the product or even the client or the customer for which they're supposed to be in service or of service for. So I have to agree with you on that. Now, your book, Each Trickle After the Other. I have to ask, did you find that the title of your book came to you first and you wrote around the title, or did you simply start writing and you found that the title kind of came out of your writing? How did you come up with that title?
I know exactly what circumstances I wrote it under, and how I did it was I was on the bus one day many, many years ago, and there was water coming down the windshield, and what came into my mind was each trickle after the other. And I said, why am I saying that? And that's how, it's the first thing in my book on page 3. It's the explanation of the title. And as I said, we each do the easiest thing, even the water and the wind. But my point of the poem is that those who don't follow those rules, with no matter for what has gone before, and that is the trickle, not to ignore. You know, you have to be outside rather than inside to really live a life.
I love it. I love it. Now, with so many authors, especially the poets that I've talked to, their writings can be kind of something that comes to them all at once, and they found that over a certain period of time, like weeks or perhaps a few months, they have written 100 bits of poetry that they've included in a book. Others have said that it's been a lifelong result of writing. How did your writing of poetry come to be? Is it something that's more recent, or have you found that it's been the journey of your life?
I have to say it's more the journey of my life, because most of what's in my book was not written recently. I started out as a teenager when the words would come to me. I always loved to read. I started to read great poets like Emily Dickinson, and they made such sense to me. And so a lot of this has been a journey, but I haven't written it in recent years. What happened in 2015 is I had the time to say, gee, I would have loved a book with my name on it. I don't even care if it sells, is what I said. I just want to carry it with my name because I love books. And with all the things you can do, you can read without carrying a book now, I still prefer it. And when these came out, and Ex Libris was wonderful in putting the pictures in. I couldn't have picked those. They did a marvelous job linking it with the poetry. So, a lot of these things, I read them over and I say, yeah, that's right. But my watershed moment of illness 7 years ago made everything more real. And I said, gee, I'd like to have this book. And Ex Libris said, we'll do it. I said, okay.
I love it. You know, I have to agree with you. I am more of I'm going to say a traditionalist when it comes to books. I love having that tangible book in my hand.
Exactly,
and,
yes.
You know, to be able to just have that bit of that space where I go to be able to read and to be able to turn the pages and read. But I also find that when I read a book versus using Kindle, you know, the e-book version,
sure.
People will interrupt me with an e-book because they simply think I'm on like social media. But when I have a book, they kind of walk in and see, oh, she's reading, and will kind of respect my space in that moment. So, You're
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And furthermore, I like to lay down and read a book. I don't like to sit at my desk and read a book. It takes the flavor away from it for me. So, you know.
Yeah. You know, it's so funny because we see all of these movies where the future looks more like the beginnings of some societies, and that we don't have electricity and everything is just very haphazard almost in its connection. And I say, but books will survive. You know, your phone may not have a charge, so that e-book that you have, you won't be able to read it in e-book, but this beautiful library that I have
that's right.
Books will still be there. So I think everything has its place and purpose. I agree with you on that. Now, what was or what is the gift of years that you believe so strongly in?
You know, I have to say, and it's kind of interesting, my mom was a great thinker, but of course when you're a kid and a teenager, you don't think so. But as Mark Twain said, as I got older, she got smarter. And that's very true. right?
That's
Be-
true.
because she said things to me, if you have the gift of years, what does that mean to me? It means a lot to me now because that's when someone tells me something that's negative, I say, you've been given the gift of years. Many people don't have that. You have a right to have a life and a joyful life. And that's what it is. Gift of years gives you wisdom. If you train yourself properly, it can give you joy. I'm happier today than I was 40 years ago. Just because things have happened. I work very hard in my life. I work 12 and 13 hours a day to make a living. And you know what? I'm able now, not that I planned it, I'm able to do many things now that I could not do before. I can actually communicate with my dog. I can walk out in the morning and say, hey, beautiful day. I can notice things I never noticed before. That's a great kick. That's the gift of years.
Yeah, I love that. Having a different perspective, and I have to agree with you with having someone who is so wise in your life to pass on those bits of wisdom. My grandmother was one of those people, and I tell everyone, it's like everything my grandmother told me was true, even though she was born in 1903, and she has seen a world change and adapt and evolve. And her bits of wisdom are still true today because they're very foundational things, not, bad type of instruction, but very foundational things. So you are so right. We were talking about that the other day, and I said, may I be blessed with many years and get to be, not only a grandmother, but perhaps even a great-grandmother to pass on that wisdom. I love that, Ina. Thank you for sharing that.
I always say that the two wisest women I ever knew never had a college education because of the times, but the wisest women were my grandmother, who lived in the house as I grew up, which is something that's not done today, and I think it's lacking, my mother and my grandmother. No college education, but horse sense, you couldn't beat it anywhere. And that's how I was able to get through certain major challenges in my life because of them.
So true. Oh, so true. And I look at the women of that time, and I go how strong they were. The tenacity, but yet just sassy enough to believe in the audacity that they could, in spite of what society was telling them that they couldn't, simply because they were women. So I love that. That's amazing. Thank you for reminding us of that. Now, one more question before it's time for us to go to break. And kind of going a little backwards, and I want to kind of touch on something that you said about your book being published. So many times we feel that right now is the time. We almost feel compelled to get it out there. Did you feel that after you were writing that there was a push, that there was a nudge that said now is the time, that 1 year or a particular month was more important to get it out than any other particular time?
I will tell you that after what I call my watershed moment of illness, it became more important to me to connect to people, to care for them, which I had always done. It's always been my nature to take a hand or be something that's a little helpful to them. So when I looked at each trickle after the other again, I said, if this would help people, as many of these kind of things have helped me, reading, then I'd like to do that. And it became a very big need for me to share, which I've always been taught to do. And so that's as honest as I can be, that if I think many things in here can help many people because of my experiences, and I'm happy to share that because I think we're all connected in some way. As John Donne once said, each man's death diminishes me because I'm a part of all mankind. I think we've forgotten that in this world. And so that's the way I feel.
Well, I have to agree with you that, it's still interesting that the older that I get, like you said, your perspective changes. You start to learn not only more about yourself, but about the people that are around you and about your community. Yeah. And so kind of looking at my grandmother again, being a person personally who is multicultural, you learn that everyone's perspective is true for them. But when we kind of drill down to it, there's so much common ground amongst more people than we realize. As women, we can talk about things, and there's like, I went through that too. It's like, you guys went through that? Oh, my goodness. West Coast versus East Coast, or living in the North versus being in the South. But under it all, we all want to be loved and respected and cared for, and we want to make a positive mark, in our community, and leave our family a little bit better than what we were when we were born into it. So what a wonderful way to remind us. Thank you for doing that. Now, before we go to break, Ina, I want to ask you if you could please remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy, and how can we get in contact with you?
Well, the name of the book is Each Trickle After the Other, and it's not it's an 8.5 by 11. I always called it my coloring book because it has everything in there that I enjoy at all times. You could go to Amazon. You could go to Amazon.com and buy the book. It's both in book form, which I would strongly suggest. There's an ebook, but the pictures are not in the ebook, and I think this does a lot for it. You can also contact me. Tell me what you think. I really, really would like to know. You could do that at my email, which is ina.goldberg@sbcglobal.net.
Gotcha. Alrighty, listeners. Now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for a Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I want to do? I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you. And today we are talking about having a renewed spirit, about love, pain, purpose, promise, and the future. My guest today is Ina Goldberg, and we're talking about her book, Each Trickle After the Other. Now, Ina, my next question for you is about a favorite. Are there favorite poems in your book that you wrote as opposed to other poems? Like, did you find that one really spoke to you more, so you had to make sure that you included it because it's one of your favorites?
I have to say there's two that it's hard for me to talk about myself. It's always been a problem, but I really like the ones that are titled Mom. There's one for Mom and one for Dad. I don't, you sometimes go, did I have that skill to do that so quickly? But I like them both very much in their own way. And there's probably one other I like a lot, Prisoner of the Stars. And the picture that was put in there is so good with it. Those are my favorites. And that's just me, because when I look back upon it, it makes so many things that are no longer around very real and brings a smile to my face. And I think a lot of people can find what's in there about their own families. Maybe they could say, hey, that's like my family, or this, or, the father who kicked you in the can, right, to get you to succeed, and things like that. So, yes, those are my favorites and the ones I most connect to.
I think it's so interesting how you say that even though it's not around, it still makes it very real. And there are things that I see because I travel so much that there are things that I see that remind me of a grandmother, grandfather, an aunt, or an uncle, and they themselves, the person is no longer around, but that thing reminds me of them, and boy, does it bring a smile to your face. So, you know, You're right. Sometimes we just because something is obsolete or no longer used, it doesn't mean that it's not useful. It doesn't mean that it isn't precious or cherished any longer. So I agree with you on that. Now, why do you feel that with all of the things that you have done and all of the things that you're able to do you feel that poetry is one of the gifts that you have been given? Why do you think that you're able to have such an influence over written language in such a way?
Well, you know, there's a force that maybe when I was much younger, I didn't pay a lot of attention. But I have to say that sometimes I look to the sky and I say, thank you, God, and thank you, Len. Len was my spouse, and he passed away some years ago. He wasn't very old. And so I have to say, with things that I've seen happen, I say there's something out there, you know, and there's some kind of force. And if I'm not right, so what? You know what I mean? It's like there's something that I've been given certain gifts in my life. There's no question. And influences in my life that were terribly, terribly important. So I thank God every day for having given me the ability for words to come so easily, which transferred into my teaching school successfully, and has helped people now at more senior ages. I grasp out for those things that they need to hear, and somehow I believe all the things that I say because, you know, in life, work, for instance, was never an interruption of my life. It was just, work was just always a natural extension of my life. And I think people have to think about that. And that's what I'm happy about. I'm happy to still have the ability to help people and to put a smile on my face more often than years ago.
Yeah. I like that. Now, you have oftentimes said that work has to be a natural extension of your life and not an interruption of it. I love that. But what do you mean by that? Because I know that there's someone saying, well, I'm good at a whole lot of stuff, Ina, and, you know, the stuff that I'm good at sometimes interrupts my personal life. So what do you mean by that?
I think your whole life has to connect to your work in my experience. I have met people who, I guess they use the word compartmentalize. In other words, they're in a certain business. They don't have the heart for it, but they sure have the desire for the money in it. It doesn't, I know people like that in my life who are not happy. So whatever it is you're doing, when I say I was in the insurance business, did I make a tremendous amount of money? No, but I made a good living, and I helped people in ways that others didn't care about. Okay? So when I got claims paid, you know, $100,000 claim and this and that, this was a part of who I was that was in my work. It was just a natural extension of who I was. I didn't turn on and turn off. I just was a complete person as much as possible. And I think those are the kinds of things that make us happy.
I like that. I like how you said you didn't have to turn off or turn on. You could simply be yourself.
That's right. That's right. And you have to, you know, a lot of people say, oh, find what you like to do and, you know, make money at it. That's a good philosophy, but it's very important to be making a living and converting it into something good for you. Okay, and that's a lot of what, I'm not saying all bosses are happy about that, but as long as you're doing a good job and you have to bring in the money, but people, clients have to think well of you. That's terribly important.
Absolutely, because I know that not only am I that way, but others have told me as well. When someone does a great job and I feel that they cared about me in that moment, that my whatever the case was, that I was mistaken about something or something was missing, if I felt that they were empathetic towards me, I will gladly go back to that person, and they kind of become my representative at that company or my associate that I really trust to do what needs to be done. I see what you mean.
I
with
agree
that.
with you. Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, you kind of touched on earlier that you have included poetry, mom and dad, in your book, and you just said how you were pretty much taught to be yourself. Don't do the off and on and kind of turn it off and on. Can you say that your mother and father helped influence you in that way? And do you think that is why you were able to write about them and share that perspective with us in your book?
I will say, of course, parents are very influential, but they have to be a certain way as opposed to a grandmother. So that's why I think it's terribly important, though it's out of tradition, for a grandmother to live with the parents and with the children. It did me an incredible amount of good. Much of my spirit is my grandmother's, there's no question. But my parents gave me a sensible approach. You work for a living, you have ethics, you don't do the wrong thing, you do the right thing, and you always have to understand what your parents came from. And mine were the outcome of the Depression and World War II. And when you gain some years on that and you look back, you know why you agree with them on things, why you didn't agree. But all in all, the total influence was terribly important, especially about my teeth. My grandmother taught me from a very young age. She said, always take care of your teeth. You don't want false ones. Right?
That's it. Yeah,
To this day, every single day I have a ritual with it, and that's from her influence. So, what can I say?
That is so true. Mm-hmm. No, I hadn't thought about that. That is so true. I think my grandparents told me that much more than any other person that has had any type of influence over my life. But like you said, their perspective is different. What they lived through and what their parents lived through gives you that bit of wisdom. Now, before we go to break, Ina, I want to ask you if you could please remind everyone what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how can we get in contact with you?
Well, the name of the book is Each Trickle After the Other. You could go to Amazon.com and buy the book. It's both in book form, which I would strongly suggest. There's an e-book, but the pictures are not in the e-book, and I think this does a lot for it. You can also contact me. Tell me what you think. I really, really would like to know. You could do that at my email, which is ina.goldberg@sbcglobal.net.
Gotcha. Alrighty, listeners. Now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for a Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I want to do? I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you. And today we are talking about having a renewed spirit. My guest today is Ina Goldberg, and we're talking about her book, Each Trickle After the Other. Now, speaking of grandmothers, and it's so funny because I tend to bring up my grandmother a lot. Not that my mom doesn't give me great info, because she does. Mm-hmm. But sure. My grandmother's no longer here, so I'm a little nostalgic with my grandparents. Would you say that for that person who, and I heard what you said with grandmothers or grandparents having access, being in the home with you, has such a tremendous influence. So the person who's saying, oh man, but my grandmother is, 1,000 miles away from me, and I would love for them to be able to interact with my children more, or even be able to interact with me more. Do you have a bit of wisdom that you could share with that person who doesn't have their grandparent around them physically, but they could have access to them? What are some things they could do?
I really, really strongly believe that I just read an article on the internet yesterday about how this old thing people used to do, like eating dinner together, we should bring that back, shouldn't we? Of course it was essential. It's essential to have a connection to different generations who can teach you different things because their purposes are different. So I got to say, if there's a way for a grandparent to live in the house, my mother was not in favor of her mother living with her. My father was in favor of her mother living with us. It happens that way. But what a wonderful influence she was in so many ways. And without her, I could not have been many of the things I am today in the world we live in. Because things go on, people are mean to each other, they're foul language and everything. My grandmother taught me, regardless of the influences, you stay who you are. And that was the greatest lesson she taught. And that's what I do. If I hear language, I hear people just mean to each other, I say, have a good day. Makes me feel better.
Yeah.
So, what can you do? And one of the poems in my book is dedicated to her as well, and I think people will figure out which one that one is. So,
you said about personality, and it is so true. I remember I was doing. I used to take ballet as a little girl, between 7 and about 10. I took ballet, and I remember I went over to my grandmother's one day, and I was sharing with her, what I've learned. And my grandmother's favorite program was about to start, and I wasn't aware. I knew it was coming on, but being a kid, I really wasn't very aware of how she was preparing to watch her program. And I remember my mother said, "Oh, it's time to sit down now, dear. Grandma's program's coming on." And my grandmother said, "Oh, it's okay. Finish showing me what you learned today." Now, I didn't get it at the moment, but I got it. It was oh, Grandma wants to see. So, I finished my, my pirouettes and all that, and then I showed her, what I learned for the day. And I was so happy because my grandmother was so interested in what I wanted to do. Looking back, I see how that bit of a sacrifice of just 3 more minutes of her time made such a warm effect on my life, and how she was able to still ultimately get what she wanted, but still give me that bit of wit and wisdom. So
exactly, it's like their second chance. That's how they treated grandparents. Yeah. It's their second chance, and so they're different than they were with their own kids, and that's not bad. That's very good. So, but as adults, we have to recognize that. So.
Yeah, I've heard people say that too. It's what? I can't believe you're letting him eat, sugary cereal. You wouldn't let me have candy until I was 16.
That's right.
What?
That's right. That's absolutely true. And she was, occasionally I would even hear my father, I remember saying to her, to my mother, he said, don't let your mother raise your child. So there seemed to be a lot of that kind of going on, and maybe that was true. But my mother was her own force. But I remember my father saying that, don't let your mother raise your child. It's not that we were a joyful house all the time, or there weren't conflicts. Yeah. But you learn that people fight around with each other, and they also make up. And that's important to learn too.
Absolutely, and it's amazing how the different personalities, and how everyone blends in their own way. but yet how even as children we've learned how to adapt to the needs of mom, of dad, of our grandparents, of our aunts and uncles, of cousins, our first introduction to the real world and how people interact with us. So that family dynamic is so true. Now, speaking of other people and adapting and learning what we can and cannot do, in the foreword of your book, you have an acknowledgement to a few folks, and I wanted to ask you about that. You mentioned someone named Lynn and Jay. Why are they mentioned, and why did you feel that it was important to include them?
Well, I'd have to say, as a young person, Len, I met in college, and I knew him from the time I was 19, and I knew him for 45 years. And his loss was great. It's not even explainable, but there were so many things I could develop and be because of him. And to lose him, my private, that's where everything private was, where I could share things. And that's been a great loss for me. But as I've oftentimes said, people die, but love doesn't. And the truth of the matter is that I've built things in dedication to him. There are people, specific people I'm friendly with, a limited amount, who would love him as well. I can be very particular now, who I eat with, who I don't. That's the great gift he gave me. Yeah. And he was with me so many years. Now, his friend Jay, who was kind of a nutty guy, but very fun and very funny, Len knew him when he was 14. I met Jay when I was 19. So, I lost both of them. Yeah, I lost both of them a year apart, and that is a very difficult thing to tolerate. But like I say, there's ways to look at the world, and it's all in how you look at it. And for those people who have had losses, as I've had certain gains in my life, certain losses. The old story, you don't get everything. And I have to say certain things are very good today. And I love my dog very much. And I have a lot of good times, but things aren't as fun without certain people around.
Yeah. I as a young person, I didn't understand why people would say certain phrases that pretty much meant tell people that you love them while they're here. Spend time with the people that are important with you. Don't let a simple misunderstanding turn into a lifelong of separation. We have to understand that we're people and we mess up, but we want to be forgiven and we need to forgive. So I can understand that as someone who has now lost a parent. My father passed away when I was a child. My mother remarried, and my stepfather has passed away, but he was so much more than a stepfather. He really was a dad. And I tell you, it's hard. My grandmother, both of my grandmothers and grandfathers have passed away now, and it's hard, those people, like you say, that made such a positive influence on your life, that you start to realize how precious they were. And your friends become so much more important to you because you do get to that age where you see that it is so important to have coffee or tea with someone sometimes, just to be in their presence for nothing more, not to complain or anything like that or even get caught up, but just to be in their presence. And
that's right. That's right. That's what I say to people. You don't have to pay for dinner. I enjoy your company. And that's really the truth, because I don't have company with people I don't enjoy anymore, and I think that's a great plus. I think that's a great plus.
I have to agree with you. That is a luxury, and I don't think that we really understand that, like when we're in our 20s, because we're on that rat wheel trying to impress others or get in where you fit in, and all those cliche things, because we're trying to make a way for ourselves. But I'm pushing 50. I'm like almost like a toe right there, and there is a different reality. There's a different truth on your life when you get to this point. Like you said, it is a luxury. Not to be pompous or egotistical, but just like you said, I want that positive energy around me.
That's right.
And that's what I invite in. I love it. Right. Well, Ina, I could talk to you all day, but we are out of time. I tell you, I have really enjoyed my time with you this morning, and it really it's a joy to talk to someone who's so open and honest, and I think that our listeners have enjoyed what you brought to the table today. Their coffee and tea is a little bit better because I think
that's nice of you to say, and I have to tell you what a joy it was for me to talk to you. And if I can help people, if people want to talk to me or get my book, which I think will be useful to them, or just send me an email, that would be wonderful, just the communication.
Yeah.
And you really have been a wonderful person to talk to as well, and I thank you.
Thank you. One more time, Ina, if you would, please. The book is Each Trickle After the Other. But contact-wise, again, if you could remind them, how should they get in contact with you?
You could contact me at my email if you want, which is ina.goldberg@sbcglobal.net. That's the best way to get in touch with me. That's what I pay the most attention to. And you can, if you want my book, you can go to Amazon.com and order it, and they'll be happy to fill the request.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Ina, for being on with us this morning.
And I thank you. And everybody else, too.
Right. And listeners, I thank you as well for tuning in and spending some time with us today. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.